My dad is pressuring me to let his work buddy walk me down the aisle instead of him. I'm 28F, and I'm getting married in a few months. It's been an exciting and stressful time, and the planning has been a roller coaster. But overall, I'm super excited. There's just one major issue that's causing some serious tension between me and my dad, and it's really starting to get to me. So, here's what happened. My dad and I have always had a decent relationship. It hasn't been perfect, but we've always gotten along well enough. Growing up, he wasn't the most involved parent, but he did what he could, and I've always appreciated that. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that he's more of a traditionalist when it comes to family roles, and I'm starting to see how that's causing a lot of friction now that I'm planning my wedding. As the wedding planning started to come together, I was super excited to have my dad walk me down the aisle. It's something I'd always envisioned since I was a little girl. We've had those heart-to-heart talks about how special that moment would be, and I was really looking forward to it. So when I brought it up to him, he was all smiles, and everything seemed fine at first. But then, about a month ago, he dropped a bombshell. Out of nowhere, he started talking about this guy he works with, Dave. Apparently, Dave is this guy my dad has been friends with for years. They met at work, and according to my dad, they've been through a lot together. To be fair, I've met Dave a few times over the years at various family get-togethers, and he seems like a nice guy. But he's not someone I'd consider super close to me. In fact, I wouldn't even describe him as a friend. So my dad says to me, I was thinking it would be nice if Dave walked you down the aisle instead of me. He's been a huge part of my life, and it would mean a lot to him. I was shocked. I wasn't even sure how to respond. Dave, the guy who barely knows anything about my life, who's more of a colleague to my dad than a family member. Why on earth would he walk me down the aisle? My dad went on about how much it would mean to Dave, and how it would be a great way to show appreciation for his support over the years. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was really about what my dad wanted, not what I wanted. I tried to explain to him that this was supposed to be my special day, and I wanted my dad to walk me down the aisle, like we'd talked about for years. I told him that I was grateful for Dave and that he could be involved in the wedding, but that this moment was one I'd always imagined sharing with him. Well, my dad didn't take that too well. He started getting defensive and said that I was being selfish for not thinking about how much this would mean to Dave. He argued that I should be more open to the idea, since Dave had been such a good friend to him. The more he talked about it, the more I felt like he wasn't even hearing me. It was like my wishes didn't matter as much as Dave's feelings. To make things worse, my mum, who I thought would be on my side, actually sided with my dad. She said that Dave had been a huge support for my dad and that it would be a nice gesture to include him. I felt like everyone was ganging up on me, and it just didn't feel right. So now I'm in this situation where my dad is pressuring me to let Dave walk me down the aisle, and I'm feeling like I'm being forced to choose between my dad's wishes and my own. I feel like I'm stuck in the middle, and it's making me really anxious and frustrated. I've tried explaining to both of them that I just want to have this one moment with my dad, but it doesn't seem to be sinking in. I don't want to make a huge scene or cause family drama, but I also don't want to give up something so important to me. Am I wrong for refusing to let my dad's friend take that moment from me? Should I just give in and let it go for the sake of peace, or should I stand my ground? I'm genuinely torn here, and I'd love some advice on how to handle this without making it worse. Update 1. 2 weeks later. First of all, thank you so much for all the supportive and thoughtful comments. After reading through everything, I realized I was maybe getting a little too wrapped up in the idea of tradition and trying to please everyone. I really appreciated all the advice to just trust my gut and communicate with my dad. I've definitely taken a lot of it to heart, and I think it's helped me approach the situation a little differently. So I took some time to really think things through, and I decided to sit down with my dad again. This time, I wanted to make sure I wasn't just reacting out of frustration, but also really explaining how much this moment meant to me and why it wasn't just about me being stubborn or refusing to compromise. I thought I had been clear before, but I guess I didn't fully explain why it was so important to me for him to walk me down the aisle. I also realized that I was letting a lot of my emotions get the best of me, so I needed to approach this with a calmer mindset. I sat down with him at his place one evening when he wasn't busy with work, and I started by acknowledging how important Dave is to him. I made sure to tell him that I appreciated their friendship and that I understood why Dave might want to be involved in such a meaningful event. But then I explained that the reason I wanted him, my dad, to walk me down the aisle wasn't about excluding Dave. It was about the bond we share and how this is the one moment in my life that's all about us, father and daughter. I told him I loved him and that this was something I'd imagined since I was a little girl. I tried to explain how special this day was for me and how it felt like I would be giving away something I'd been dreaming of for years. Honestly, it was a hard conversation. He listened, but he didn't really say much at first. I could tell he was thinking about what I said. There was this long pause, and I almost thought he wasn't going to get it. But then he finally spoke. He said, "I never thought of it that way." He admitted that he'd been so focused on what Dave might want that he didn't realize how much it meant to me. I could tell he was genuinely trying to understand where I was coming from. I also told him that it didn't mean Dave couldn't be part of the wedding in some way. He could be there for the ceremony, or even do a reading or speech if he wanted. I just didn't want him taking the place of my dad for that one special moment. I think hearing that helped him understand that I wasn't trying to shut Dave out entirely. I just wanted the moment to stay personal for me and my dad. And after a lot of back and forth, he finally agreed. He told me that he was sorry for putting me in this position and that he understood why it was important to me. He also acknowledged that he hadn't been fully thinking about how I'd feel, and he thanked me for taking the time to explain it to him. He even promised that he'd make sure to keep things clear with Dave moving forward and that he'd respect my wishes on the big day. That said, I was really happy with how the conversation went. It was an emotional conversation for both of us, but it felt like we were finally on the same page. I think the key here was approaching it with patience and really explaining why it was so important to me, without blaming him or making him feel like I was rejecting him. He admitted that he had made a mistake by not really listening to me before, and that meant a lot to me. Now, I've been focusing on the fun aspects of wedding planning again, and I feel a lot less stressed about the whole situation. It feels like we're back on track, and I'm really looking forward to having my dad walk me down the aisle. I've also decided to have a little chat with Dave at some point soon to explain that my dad will be doing the honors. I'm hoping he'll understand, especially since my dad and I had a pretty heartfelt conversation about it. I'll keep you all updated as things go along, but I just wanted to let you know that for now, things seem to be looking up. Thanks again for all your help and advice. It really made me feel like I wasn't alone in this. Edit. Some of you have pointed out that I may have been a little harsh with my dad at first, and I totally get where you're coming from. Looking back, I could have been a bit more patient earlier on. But I was also feeling a lot of pressure, and it wasn't just about the wedding. It was also about this deeper feeling of not being heard. I'm glad I was able to sit down and have a real conversation with him though, and I think that's what made the difference. So I guess this has been a bit of a learning experience for both of us. Update 2, about 2 weeks later. Hi everyone, here's a longer update after the recent turn of events with my dad and his friend, Dave. I felt it was important to clear things up because I could tell my dad was still feeling torn about how to balance everything. Turns out, he'd been wrestling with feeling like he was caught between my wishes and his friendship with Dave. He ended up suggesting we all meet to chat, which made me nervous but hopeful. I wanted us to get on the same page, even if it meant hashing out a few awkward moments. When we sat down, it was clear this conversation wasn't easy for any of us. My dad began by telling Dave, gently but directly, that he'd be walking me down the aisle by himself. He emphasized that this was a big, personal moment for us as father and daughter. Watching him say this, I could tell how hard it was for him to have to clarify this boundary with his friend. It was almost as if he felt he owed it to Dave to honor their friendship in some big way. Yet he also didn't want to let me down. I truly appreciated him stepping up, and I could see how much it meant to him to support me. At first, Dave seemed a little taken aback and quiet. He had no idea that all this had been weighing on me so heavily, or that his involvement was causing any tension. After a few moments, though, he said he understood and apologized for overstepping. He mentioned that he hadn't realized how much this meant to me and genuinely thought he was just helping out. I felt a bit relieved to hear that he didn't take it personally and was open to understanding my side. We all agreed that Dave could still play a special role in the wedding, but in a way that wouldn't interfere with this father-daughter moment. I suggested he do a reading during the ceremony and even mentioned that he could stand alongside the groomsmen as an honorary member. He seemed to like the idea and even made a light-hearted joke about being the cool uncle figure, which helped ease the tension. My dad chimed in with his approval, saying he was glad that Dave could be involved without causing any more confusion. This conversation really highlighted just how much my dad had been struggling with the whole situation. He shared that he'd felt torn between his close bond with Dave and his duty as my dad. He He even admitted that he wasn't quite sure how to handle the request from both sides, which was part of why he hadn't brought it up sooner. I could tell he felt like he owed Dave some level of recognition, but also that he knew, deep down, that this was ultimately about us as father and daughter. My dad told me afterward that he appreciated me for being patient and open enough to talk things through without escalating the conflict. He mentioned that seeing how much the tradition meant to me really gave him a new outlook on it. That simple gesture of him agreeing to stand by my side alone meant the world to me. I think he was genuinely grateful that we'd worked things out with Dave in a way that respected all sides. After this talk, I realized that sometimes these situations are more about emotional ties than the specific requests themselves. My dad values his friendship with Dave in ways I hadn't fully understood, and I'm grateful he shared that with me. But I also think this was a necessary step for us as father and daughter to reaffirm that connection, which is why we're now both looking forward to the wedding even more. I left our conversation feeling incredibly relieved and so much closer to my dad. Now, with things clarified, I'm confident that the day will go smoothly and we're all on the same page. I couldn't be more grateful for the support here. It helped me find the courage to have a tough but meaningful conversation. Thanks so much for giving me the push to handle this in the most considerate way possible.